The computer sitting on your desk right now is being held back, not by its processor, not by its RAM, not by its storage drive, by its operating system. And the most unsettling part of that sentence is not the claim itself. It is the fact that most people will read it, feel a flicker of skepticism, and then go back to waiting for Windows to finish updating before they can do the thing they actually sat down to do. I know, because that was me. For years, that was me. I want to tell you what happened when I finally got rid of Windows and replaced it with Linux. Not the version of that story that the open source community loves to tell, the clean, triumphant narrative where everything just works and the hero rides off into a sunset of superior performance and pure digital freedom. I want to tell you the real version. The version that includes the moments of genuine frustration, the unexpected discoveries, the things that were harder than I expected, and the things that were so much better than I expected that they permanently changed how I think about what a computer is supposed to feel like. Because the honest version of this story is more useful to you than the inspirational one, and it ends in a place that the inspirational version actually undersells. Let me start with the thing that nobody warned me about adequately. Not the difficulty, the speed. I had been running Windows on this machine for 4 years. 4 years of cumulative update deposits, antivirus background scanning, telemetry services running their continuous phone home operations, and startup applications stacking their collective weight onto every boot cycle. I had watched my boot time grow from something quick and satisfying into something I had unconsciously restructured my morning routine around. Start the computer, go make coffee, come back, maybe it's ready. I had accepted this as the nature of computing the way you accept traffic on your commute, as an irritation built into the experience rather than a problem with a solution. When I opened the task manager one afternoon out of curiosity and looked at what Windows was doing while I was doing nothing, I counted 16 background processes running at idle. The machine was sitting there, no applications open, no tasks running, and it was consuming memory and CPU cycles on operations that existed entirely to serve Microsoft's infrastructure rather than my war telemetry. Update services, the Windows search indexer spinning away, the connected user experience service, which is a name that means data collection if you read the documentation carefully enough. 16 processes, doing nothing for me, all the time. That afternoon I made a bootable USB drive and installed Ubuntu. And what I experienced in the first 48 hours is what I want to describe as carefully as I can, because it is not what the advocacy prepared me to expect. The boot time was the first thing. I will not give you a benchmark number because a benchmark number would make this feel like a laboratory result rather than a lived experience. And it was a lived experience. The machine booted before I had processed the fact that I had pressed the power button. Not faster than Windows. Substantially, categorically, qualitatively faster than Windows. The same processor, the same RAM, the same storage drive. The transformation had zero hardware involvement. The difference was entirely the operating system, and the magnitude of that difference produced a kind of cognitive dissonance that I was not prepared for. I kept rebooting it, not because anything was wrong, because I wanted to watch it happen again. When I checked the Linux idle state, the equivalent of that Windows Task Manager moment, the memory consumption at rest was a fraction of what Windows considered doing nothing, not somewhat lower, a fraction. The background processes that Linux runs at idle exist to serve the operating system's actual function, not to collect, transmit, and process data about my behavior for a corporation's advertising and product development operations. The difference was not subtle. It was the kind of difference that makes you realize the baseline you had accepted as normal was never actually normal. It was Windows-specific normal. Those are two very different things. Now, here's where I want to be honest with you in the way that the Linux community sometimes is not. The first week was not seamless. The first week had moments that required patience, research, and a willingness to sit with unfamiliarity rather than immediately retreating to the comfortable. If you go in expecting a drop-in replacement where every habit transfers automatically and every workflow continues without interruption, you will hit a wall in the first few days, and that wall will feel larger than it actually is. The application menu was in a different place. The system settings were organized differently. The file manager behaved differently from Windows Explorer in ways that were not wrong, just different enough that my muscle memory was constantly reaching for something that was not where it used to be. The honest measurement of the relearning period is not days, it is habits. Specific habitual actions that your fingers do automatically on Windows need to be consciously rebuilt on Linux. And that rebuilding takes as long as it takes for the new action to become the automatic one. For me, the major habits were reconstructed in about 2 weeks. For someone with deeper Windows dependency, more specialized workflows, more application-specific routines, it might take longer. The advocacy does not always say this clearly enough. The software question is where I want to give you the most honest accounting, because this is the area where the universal claim fails most visibly and the individual reality varies most significantly. The general answer to, can I run my applications on Linux, is it depends entirely on which applications. That is not a hedge. That is the accurate answer. And anyone who gives you a simpler one is either not telling you the full story or has not tested the specific applications you actually need. For the majority of my daily work, writing, research, communication, document management, web-based tools, Linux was a complete replacement without any meaningful compromise. The LibreOffice suite handled my existing document library with reliable compatibility for standard files. Web browsers on Linux are the same browsers you use on Windows. The email clients, the calendar tools, the communication applications, the vast majority of the software that constitutes daily knowledge, work exists on Linux in either native form or through web interfaces that do not distinguish between platforms. Where I hit genuine friction was in the specific category of complex documents with advanced formatting. Files built on Microsoft Office's proprietary rendering engine, where the precise visual layout was critical, multi-column layouts with embedded objects, presentations with custom animations, spreadsheets using advanced Excel-specific functions. These did not always translate perfectly to LibreOffice's rendering. Oh, the compatibility gap was not catastrophic, but it was real, and the honest account requires saying so rather than glossing over it with the reassurance that LibreOffice is basically the same thing. For documents where the precise visual output matters as much as the content, the compatibility is good enough for most situations and not good enough for some. Your specific situation will determine which category you fall into. For gaming, the story has changed dramatically enough that the old narrative of Linux as a gaming dead end is no longer accurate. But the new narrative of Linux as a gaming platform equal to Windows in all respects is also not accurate. The truth is somewhere between those positions and moving steadily in one direction. Proton, the compatibility layer Valve developed for the Steam Deck, has transformed what is possible for gaming on Linux. The ProtonDB database documents thousands of Windows titles that run on Linux with playable to fully functional performance. Single-player titles, particularly those without kernel-level anti-cheat systems, frequently run through Proton with performance that matches, or in some specific cases, exceeds the Windows equivalent on the same hardware. The DXVK translation layer that converts DirectX calls to Vulkan has been optimized to a degree that surprised me when I started benchmarking my library. The genuine limitation is in competitive multiplayer titles that use kernel-level anti-cheat. Games where the anti-cheat system requires deep Windows integration, Valorant, certain versions of competitive games using Easy Anti-Cheat or BattleEye in their Windows. Native configurations do not run through Proton because the anti-cheat cannot be satisfied. If those specific titles are central to your gaming life, that is a real constraint that Linux currently cannot resolve. Everything else is a conversation worth having based on your specific library, and the ProtonDB research investment before you migrate is time well spent. The privacy discovery was the one that landed with the most lasting impact. Not because I was naive about Windows telemetry in the abstract. I had read the articles, and I understood in general terms that Windows collects usage data. But there is a difference between knowing something abstractly and watching it happen in real time on your own network. When I ran packet capture software during my first week on Linux and monitored what the operating system was communicating externally, then compared it to equivalent monitoring of a Windows installation, the difference in the volume, frequency, and destination of outbound communications was not subtle. Windows was in constant communication. Not occasionally, continuously. Data going to Microsoft server addresses at intervals that the background telemetry services design intends as the regular check-in, whose contents the end-user license agreement's legal language authorizes, but whose specific content the proprietary architecture conceals as the unexaminable background process. On Linux, the equivalent monitoring captured what you would expect an operating system to communicate. Update checks when updates are available, nothing when nothing is happening. The architecture is open source, which means the communication behavior is auditable, modifiable, and verifiable in ways that the closed Windows architecture categorically cannot be. You can know what your Linux system is sending because you can read the code that governs the sending. That quality, the verifiability, the transparency, the architectural honesty, is not a minor philosophical distinction. It is the foundational difference between an operating system that serves you and one that serves the corporation that deployed it on your machine. The update experience deserves its own attention because it represents one of the most underappreciated quality of life differences in the entire comparison. Windows updates have trained an entire generation of computer users to experience their operating system's maintenance requirements as an imposed interruption, the restart demand at the worst possible moment, the progress screen that appears when you need to leave, the mandatory reboot that cannot be deferred past the point where Windows decides it has waited long enough. This is not how updates have to work. It is how Microsoft chose to implement them. Linux updates through the package manager are comprehensive, operating system, applications, security patches, and driver updates together in a single operation, and the majority of them complete without requiring a restart at all. The updates that do require a restart are the ones that touch the running kernel, and even those can be deferred to a time you choose without the system overriding that choice because the schedule has elapsed. More significantly, the package manager updates everything on your system at once, not just the operating system. Every application installed through the repository. One command, one operation, everything current. The comparison with the Windows experience of managing operating system updates separately from application updates, separately from driver updates, each with its own interface and its own restart demands, is not close. The security architecture difference is one that the conversation about Linux often approaches through the lens of market share. Linux has fewer malware threats because it has fewer users, making it a less profitable attack target for criminal development investment. That is partially true and partially misleading. The market share argument is real but incomplete. The architectural argument is the more important one. When you install software on Linux through the distribution's official repository, you are installing from a curated, vetted, cryptographically signed package whose integrity the distribution's security team has verified before it reaches your system. The infection vector that accounts for the majority of Windows malware, the search engine result that impersonates legitimate software, the download from an unofficial source, the executable from an email attachment, does not exist in the same form when your software installation pathway runs through a trusted repository rather than a browser and a download folder. The architecture eliminates the infection vector rather than scanning for infections after the fact. The terminal. I need to address this because it is the thing that the imagery of Linux most consistently uses to intimidate people who have not used Linux, and the honest account of what the terminal actually is in daily Linux use is more accurate than the intimidation narrative. The terminal is a tool. It is an optional tool for most daily computing tasks. It is a powerful tool when you choose to use it. And it is a tool whose efficiency comparison with the Windows equivalent for specific operations, software installation in particular, does not favor the Windows approach once the comparison is made honestly. Installing an application on Linux through the terminal is a single typed command that completes automatically. Installing an application on Windows is a browser search, a download, an executable launch, a UAC prompt, a license agreement, an installation directory confirmation, and sometimes a restart. The terminal is not the barrier that the intimidation narrative presents. It is the shortcut that the intimidation narrative obscures. I want to address the hardware compatibility question with the same honesty I have tried to bring to everything else, because this is Linux's genuine challenge, and the advocacy does not always represent it fairly. Some hardware works perfectly on Linux from the first moment. Some hardware requires investigation, community research, and specific commands to configure correctly. Some hardware does not work well on Linux, and the honest answer is that you need to check your specific hardware before you migrate, rather than assuming compatibility. In my migration, the wireless adapter required 45 minutes of community forum research and a specific driver installation sequence to function correctly. That 45 minutes was frustrating. It was also, when I compare it honestly to the equivalent Windows experience of hunting for an outdated manufacturer driver on a website that has not been updated in 3 years, not actually the more difficult experience, just the unfamiliar one. Unfamiliar and difficult are not the same thing. The honest advocacy acknowledges the distinction. Now let me talk about money. Not because it is the primary reason to migrate, it is not, but because the cost elimination that Linux delivers is real and the Windows ecosystem normalizes it as inevitable in ways that deserve direct challenge. The Windows license, whose cost the OEM installation hides as a hardware purchase component, becomes visible when Windows 10's end-of-support deadline approaches, and the Windows 11 upgrade's hardware requirements declare your functional, capable computer officially obsolete. The processor requirement, the TPM version requirement, the secure boot requirement, Microsoft's hardware compatibility list for Windows 11 excludes machines that are fully capable of running demanding software, connected to the internet, and delivering productive computing experiences. They are not slow, they are not broken. They simply do not meet the arbitrary hardware threshold that Microsoft's upgrade path requires. And the message is clear: buy new hardware or fall off the supported platform. Linux does not work this way. The computer that Microsoft's hardware requirements have declared obsolete runs Linux as a current, updated, fully supported operating system, receiving active security patches and feature development. The open source model does not fund itself through planned obsolescence. The incentive structure does not require manufacturing artificial hardware requirements to drive upgrade revenue. Your old computer runs Linux. Your old computer runs Linux well. And the financial consequence of that fact, compounded over the years of computing life that Linux extends into hardware that Windows is engineering off the platform, is not a trivial number. So here is where I actually landed after the complete migration experience. Not the advocacy version, not the skepticism's dismissal, but the honest account of what daily computing on Linux is actually like after the relearning period has passed and the unfamiliarity has become familiarity. The performance improvement is real, and it is not marginal. The applications launch faster. The system responds to multitasking demands without the background process competition for resources that the Windows idle state normalized as computing's baseline condition. The RAM that Windows populated with overhead at rest is available in the Linux environment for the applications you're actually running. The performance difference does not feel like an upgrade to better hardware. It feels like the removal of something that was slowing the existing hardware down, which is exactly what it is. The privacy is real. The surveillance architecture that Windows deploys as the continuous background operation is not present. The data flow that the Windows telemetry infrastructure routes to Microsoft servers is not happening. What your computer does is your computer's business, and the operating system's architecture supports that rather than undermining it. The freedom is real in a way that is difficult to fully communicate until you have experienced the alternative. The freedom to update when you choose. The freedom to know what your system is doing. The freedom to run the software that serves your work rather than the software ecosystem that serves the platform vendor's revenue model. The freedom to keep using hardware that works rather than discarding it because a corporation's upgrade incentives require the declaration of its obsolescence. What I experienced when I replaced Windows with Linux is not what I expected. It was harder in some specific ways than the advocacy prepared me for, and better in ways that the advocacy actually undersells. Because the advocacy focuses on features, when the most significant difference is not a feature. It is a feeling. The feeling of using a machine that is entirely on your side. That is not slowing you down to serve someone else's interests. That is not watching you to build a profile it will monetize. That is not gradually working toward making your hardware feel inadequate so that you'll buy new hardware running a new license. Your computer is capable of being something significantly better than what Windows is allowing it to be. The hardware you already own can feel like a new machine without new hardware. The performance, the privacy, the control, and the cost elimination are not promises. They are the documented experience of the migration, whose honest account I have just given you in full. The difference is not an upgrade. The difference is the discovery that the constraints you accepted as computing's inherent nature were never inherent at all, or they were specific to the operating system. And the operating system is the one thing on your machine that you have always had the power to change.